The night shift on orbital station Meridian 7 was always quiet. Pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He had been working as a janitor here for 3 years now, cleaning up after aliens from a dozen different worlds. Most of them never looked at him twice. To them, he was just another human doing simple work. Didn't mind. The pay was decent, and he could send most of it back home to Earth. His sister needed the money to take care of her 2 children. Her youngest son Wu was sick, and the treatments cost more than she could afford on her own. So cleaned floors and emptied trash bins on a space station far from home, and he tried not to think about how much he missed his family. It was near the end of his shift when he heard the sound. At first, he thought it was just the station's ventilation system acting up again. But then he heard it again, a soft, whimpering noise coming from somewhere nearby. Stopped pushing his cart and listened carefully. The sound was coming from an old loading bay that hadn't been used in months. Knew he should probably just report it and move on, but something about that sound made him pause. It sounded scared. It sounded hurt. He opened the door to the loading bay and stepped inside. The lights flickered on automatically, showing rows of empty containers and old equipment covered in dust. Followed the sound to the back corner, where a large waste disposal unit sat against the wall. Behind the disposal unit, curled up in a tiny ball, was a dragon. Had seen pictures of them before. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They were ancient, powerful, and proud. Their empire stretched across multiple star systems, and other species treated them with great respect. Some said they were the oldest intelligent race still alive in the galaxy. But this dragon was not powerful. This dragon was dying. The creature was small, no bigger than a cat. Its scales were supposed to shimmer with colors, but they looked dull and gray. Its eyes were half closed, and its breathing was shallow and quick. Could see its ribs through its skin. The poor thing was starving. Knelt down slowly, trying not to scare it. The dragon looked at him with weak, frightened eyes. It made that whimpering sound again and felt his heart break a little. He knew what he should do. He should call station security right away. They were protected by galactic law. If anything happened to this hatchling, there would be serious trouble. But looking at the creature's suffering face, knew that by the time security arrived, it might be too late. Looked at his lunch container sitting in his cart. Inside was his dinner, the only meal he would eat during his shift. Rice, some vegetables, and a protein bar he had been saving for days as a special treat. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He didn't think about it for very long. Opened the container and brought it close to the dragon. The creature's eyes opened a bit wider, and its nose twitched at the smell of food. "It's okay," said softly in Korean, knowing the dragon couldn't understand him, but hoping his tone would be comforting. "You can eat it. You need it more than I do." The dragon hesitated for just a moment, then lunged forward and began eating desperately. It ate the rice in quick bites, then the vegetables, and finally the protein bar. Watched as the creature devoured everything, not leaving a single crumb. When the food was gone, the dragon looked up at him with those big eyes and realized it was still thirsty. He grabbed his thermos and poured water into the lid, holding it out carefully. The dragon drank it all, then looked at him again, this time with something other than desperation in its eyes. Sat down on the floor next to the dragon, leaning against the wall. He should get back to work. His supervisor would be angry if he found out had stopped cleaning. But he couldn't leave the little creature alone, not when it was still so weak. "I'll call you," said quietly, thinking of a name his grandmother had loved. "Just for tonight. I'm sure you have a real name, but I don't know it." The dragon made a small chirping sound. It crawled closer to, and to his surprise, climbed into his lap. Within moments it was asleep, its tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Stayed there for hours, gently stroking scales and speaking softly in Korean. He told her about Earth, about his sister and her children, about how he hoped Wu would get better soon. He told her about the stars he could see from his small apartment window and how sometimes he felt very far from home. As he talked, he noticed scales starting to change. The dull gray was fading, replaced by beautiful colors that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. She was getting better. The food had saved her life. When the morning shift was about to begin, knew he had to go. He gently tried to wake, but as soon as he moved, she disappeared. One moment she was in his lap, the next she was gone, vanished into a ventilation shaft faster than his eyes could follow. Stood up, his legs stiff from sitting so long. He looked around the empty loading bay, almost wondering if he had imagined the whole thing. But his lunch container was empty, and there were small claw marks on his uniform where had gripped him while sleeping. He pushed his cart back to the supply room and clocked out. His supervisor was waiting for him with an angry face. Had missed the last 3 hours of his shift, and that meant his pay would be cut. Just nodded and accepted it. Money could be earned again. That little dragon's life couldn't be replaced. As walked back to his tiny apartment, he felt tired and hungry. He would have to skip breakfast and maybe lunch too to make up for the food he had given away. But he also felt something else. He felt good. He had saved a life tonight, and that mattered more than anything else. He had no idea that his simple act of kindness was about to change everything. Had only been asleep for 2 hours when the pounding started. The sound was so loud that his entire apartment shook. Pictures fell off the walls and his small table rattled across the floor. Sat up in bed, his heart racing with fear. Boom, boom, boom. Someone was hitting his door hard enough to dent the metal. Scrambled out of bed, still wearing his old sleep clothes. Before he could reach the door, it slid open with a screech of broken metal. 3 massive figures stood in his doorway. They were, but not like little. These dragons stood over 7 feet tall in their humanoid forms. Their scales gleamed like armor, and horns curved back from their heads. Their eyes glowed with an inner fire that made one step back. They wore elaborate armor with symbols that recognized as marks of high rank. "Human," one of them said, his voice deep and rumbling. "You will come with us, now." Mouth went dry. What's happening? What did I do?" The dragon didn't answer. He simply stepped aside, and another figure entered the apartment. This one was even larger, even more imposing. Power radiated from him like heat from a furnace. His cheap furniture began to vibrate just from his presence. His scales were deep crimson and gold, and his eyes were ancient and terrifying. Knew who this was. Everyone in the galaxy knew. This was Sovereign, the dragon ruler of the collective, one of the most powerful beings alive. "You," said, his voice making the walls shake. "You took my daughter." Sneeze almost gave out. Daughter was the Sovereign's daughter, a princess, and had, oh no. "I can explain," said quickly, his voice shaking. "Please, I didn't hurt her. I would never hurt her." "We have security footage," said, stepping closer. "We see you taking her. We see you alone with her for hours. Where is she now?" "She left," said. "She went into a ventilation shaft. I tried to help her, I swear. She was dying and I just wanted to." "Silence!" roared and flinched back. "My daughter was kidnapped 3 days ago, stolen from her transport by traffickers. We have been searching 12-star systems for her, and now we find that a human had her and she is gone again." Realized with growing horror what this looked like. A human janitor, alone with a dragon princess. No witnesses, no proof of what really happened, and now she was missing again. "The station is in lockdown," one of the other dragons said. "All humans are confined to quarters. Our warships surround this station. You will tell us everything, or your entire species here will suffer." Felt sick. This was so much bigger than he had understood. People could die because of what he had done. Innocent people. "I'll tell you everything," said, his voice quiet but steady. "I have nothing to hide." He led them to his cleaning cart, still parked in his apartment's tiny storage space. He showed them his empty lunch container. He showed them the messages on his communicator to his sister, the ones where he told he couldn't send money this month because he had to skip meals. "I was cleaning the lower decks," explained, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "I heard crying. I found your daughter behind a waste disposal unit. She was starving. She was dying. I gave her my food. It was all I had." The dragons were silent, picked up the empty container, studying it carefully. He looked at the messages too. He looked at its docked paycheck from missing work. "You gave her everything you had," said slowly. "Why?" "Because she needed it," said simply. "Because I couldn't just walk away and let her die." "You could have called security," one of the other dragons pointed out. "By the time they arrived, she might have been dead," said. "I couldn't take that risk." Studied him for a long moment. The sovereign's eyes were unreadable, ancient, and deep. Finally, he spoke. "You stayed with her. Security footage shows you sitting with her for hours. Missing your work, you spoke to her." "I didn't want her to be alone," said. I thought she might be scared, so I talked to her. I know she couldn't understand me, but I hoped it would help." Turned to the other dragons and spoke in their language, a series of growls and musical notes that couldn't follow. The others responded, their voices filled with what sounded like shock. "You must understand," said, turning back to. "In culture, what you did creates a life debt. You saved my daughter's life asking nothing in return. You gave her everything you had knowing you would go hungry. You stayed with her when you could have left. This is unprecedented." "I just did what anyone would do," said. "No," said firmly. "Most would not. Most species would have seen advantage. They would have called for reward, for ransom, for recognition. Even those who helped would have expected something in return. But you asked for nothing." One of the other dragons stepped forward. "The food you gave her," he said, "it contained proteins that are toxic to many species, but they are life-giving. If you had given her any other food, she would have died anyway. You saved her by accident." "Not by accident," corrected. "By compassion. He gave her what he had, not knowing if it would work. That takes a different kind of courage." Looked at with those ancient eyes. "Your kind is known to be soft," he said. "Weak, short-lived and fragile, but I did not know you could be this strong. It takes great strength to give everything when you have so little." Didn't know what to say to that. He just stood there in his small apartment, surrounded by dragon warriors, waiting to learn his fate. "The life debt must be honored," said. "You saved my daughter. By our law, by our tradition, you are owed a great debt. I am sovereign of the collective. Ask anything of me, and if it is within my power, it shall be yours." Blinked. "Anything." "Wealth," said. "Territory, position, power, name it, and it is yours." Thought about his sister, about Wu's medical bills, about the life he could give them with that kind of wealth. But there was only one thing he really wanted to know. "Can I see her?" asked quietly. "Your daughter, can I see? I just want to know she's really okay." The silence in the room was absolute. The dragon stared at him like he had just grown a second head. Its expression was unreadable. "That is all you want?" asked. "To see my daughter?" "I want to make sure she's healthy," said. "That's all." Looked at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, the sovereign smiled. The main concourse of Orbital Station Meridian 7 had never been this crowded. Thousands of beings from dozens of species packed the space, all watching the raised platform in the center. News drones hovered everywhere, broadcasting the ceremony across multiple star systems. Stood on the platform next to Sovereign, feeling very small and very exposed. He was wearing his janitor uniform because it was the only clean clothes he owned. Next to the Sovereign's magnificent armor and the elaborate outfits of the court, looked like exactly what he was, a poor human who cleaned floors for a living. But none of that seemed to matter, too. The Sovereign had insisted on a formal ceremony to acknowledge the life debt. He had explained that this was important, that they took such things very seriously. Had agreed, though he didn't really understand why saving one small dragon needed all this attention. "People of the Collective," announced, his voice amplified across the concourse. "We are here to honor a debt. 3 days ago, my youngest daughter, Princess, was stolen from us. We searched desperately, fearing we would never see her again. But she escaped her captors and fled. Alone, injured, and starving, she hid on this station, waiting to die." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "This human found her by chance," continued. "He had every reason to walk away. He risked nothing by abandoning her, but instead he gave her everything he had, his food, his time, his comfort. He stayed with her when he could have left. He saved her life, asking for nothing in return. This is the highest form of honor. Turn 2. By the ancient laws of our people, you are owed a great debt. I offer you anything within my power to grant. Speak your wish, and it shall be done." Had already told them what he wanted, but apparently he had to say it again in front of everyone. He cleared his throat nervously. "I just want to see," he said, "to know she's okay." Whispers spread through the crowd. The delegates looked shocked. Even the other species seemed surprised. Apparently, no one had expected such a simple request. Raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent. "Then your wish shall be granted." A door opened at the side of the concourse and bounded out. She was much bigger than when had last seen her, already the size of a large dog. Her scales shimmered with brilliant colors, shifting between purple and blue and hints of silver. She looked healthy and strong and beautiful. When saw, she made a happy chirping sound and ran straight at him. Barely had time to brace himself before she crashed into him, knocking him back a step. She rubbed her head against his chest, making excited noises that his translator rendered as "safe giver." "Big heart, you came." Felt tears starting to form in his eyes. He wrapped his arms around her neck, hugging her tightly. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're really okay." The crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras captured every moment. Didn't care. All that mattered was that was alive and well. After a few moments, gently cleared his throat. Reluctantly stepped back, though she stayed pressed against his side. The sovereign looked at with an expression that might have been respect. "In all our recorded history," said, "no one has ever asked for so little when offered so much. Your humility and kindness have impressed us all, but I cannot let this debt go unpaid. Therefore, I make you another offer." Wiped his eyes, trying to focus. "Another offer. Come to ours," said. "Becomes official guardian and cultural liaison. You would live in the palace, wanting for nothing. You would be honored and respected. You would be the first human to ever hold such a position." His mind raced. Live on an alien planet, leave everything he knew. It sounded impossible. "Your family would be provided for," added, as if reading his thoughts. "Your sister and her children could join you if they wish. Her son's medical treatment would be covered. They would become citizens of the collective." Thought of Wu, sick and getting worse. He thought of working herself to exhaustion to pay bills. He thought of the life he could give them, the security, the future. But he also thought of leaving Earth, of living among aliens, of being so far from everything familiar. Can I think about it?" asked. "Of course," said. "Take all the time you need." As the ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, noticed one noble who was not celebrating. The dragon stood at the edge of the platform, his scales dark green and his expression cold. He was staring at with barely hidden disgust. Noticed the look too. "That is Lord," he said quietly. "He is a traditionalist. He believes humans are beneath the unworthy of respect. Do not let him concern you." But did feel concerned. The hatred in his eyes was clear. If accepted this offer, he would be making an enemy. That evening sat in his small apartment and called his sister. When his face appeared on the screen, she looked tired. Wu was in the background, coughing. Said, smiling despite her exhaustion, "I saw the broadcast, the whole planet saw it. You saved a dragon princess." "I just gave her my lunch," said, feeling embarrassed. "Don't be modest," scolded. What you did was incredible, and now they're offering you a position. Do you know what this means?" "It means leaving Earth," said, "leaving you." "It means Wu gets treatment," said firmly. "It means a better life for all of us. You've been taking care of me for years. You've sacrificed so much. Let me support you this time. Take the offer. We can come join you like they said. We can be a family again." Heard Wu cough again, a deep rattling sound that made his chest hurt. "Are you sure?" asked. "I'm sure," said. "Go, live an amazing life, help that little dragon, show the galaxy what humans can do." After the call ended, sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he sent a message to Sovereign. "I accept your offer, but I have one condition. I want to stay myself. No fancy titles. No pretending to be something I'm not, just." The response came quickly. "Agreed, just that is enough." Across the station, in his private quarters, Lord was also sending messages. But his were very different. He was reaching out to other traditionalist nobles, to mercenaries, to anyone who might help him with a plan. A human in the palace was an insult to everything the stood for, and would not allow it to happen. There was beyond anything had ever imagined. Mountains floated in the sky, held up by some ancient technology that even they themselves no longer fully understood. Crystal forests grew from the cliffsides, their branches singing in the wind. Cities were built into the sides of massive volcanoes, their buildings carved from black stone that shimmered with heat. The palace was the most magnificent of all. It sat at the peak of the highest volcano, a massive structure of crystal and stone that could be seen from anywhere on the planet. Quarters were larger than the entire apartment building he had grown up in. He had a personal balcony overlooking the crystal forests. He had servants who brought him food he couldn't pronounce. He had everything he could possibly need. And he had never felt more out of place in his life. The other nobles barely hid their contempt. They looked at him like he was dirt they had stepped in. When he walked through the palace halls, conversations would stop. Dragons would turn away or whisper to each other in their language. No one was openly rude, not with Sovereign's protection, but the message was clear. He was not welcome here. Only a few treated him with kindness. Of course, was thrilled to have him there. She spent hours with him every day, teaching him about history and culture. She was smart and curious and kind and was grateful for her friendship. There was also a young scholar who studied other species. She was fascinated by humans and asked endless questions about Earth. What did humans eat? How did they raise their children? What did they believe about the universe? Did his best to answer, though sometimes her questions made him realize how little he knew about his own people. And there was one of the palace guards. He was quiet and serious, but he had seen the footage of saving. He respected courage, no matter what species it came from. Sometimes would nod to in the hallways, a small gesture that meant more than the guard probably knew. But respect from a few was not enough to make comfortable. He missed home. He missed simple things like understanding all the conversations around him, or knowing which foods were safe to eat, or being able to blend into a crowd. Here, he stood out everywhere he went. And Wu were coming soon, which helped. The treatments had already begun for Wu, using medical technology that was centuries ahead of Earth's. The doctors said he would make a full recovery. That alone made everything worthwhile. 2 weeks after arrived at the palace, came to his quarters looking worried. She glanced around nervously before speaking. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "I've been hearing rumors. Some of the nobles are angry about you being here, very angry." "I know," said. "I can see it in how they look at me." "No, you don't understand," said. "Lord has been meeting with others in secret. I overheard some of their conversation. They're planning something." Felt a chill run down his spine. Planning what? "I don't know exactly," admitted. "But it involves the Festival of Ascending Flames. It's in 2 days. Young dragons perform their first public flights, will be participating. And they want to do something during the festival. asked. I think so, said. I heard them mention your name and name together. I think they're going to create some kind of situation where you either get hurt or look like a coward. Either way, they can say you're unworthy of your position. Sat down heavily. He should have expected this. Had made his hatred clear from the beginning. Of course he would try something. Have you told the sovereign? Asked. I can't, said. I don't have proof, just fragments of conversation. If I'm wrong, I'll be punished for spreading false accusations against a noble. But I thought you should know. After left, sat on his balcony and thought. He could go to himself, but was right without proof. It would just be his word against. A human janitor against a noble. Who would they believe? He could refuse to attend the festival, but that would make him look like a coward. It would shame, who was already nervous about her first flight. Or he could go and be prepared. Had spent 3 years working as a janitor on a space station. He knew how to notice things other people overlooked. He knew how to be invisible, how to move through spaces without being seen. He knew where equipment was stored and how systems worked. These skills might not seem impressive to dragons who could breathe fire and fly, but they were skills nonetheless. The next day, requested access to the festival grounds, claiming he wanted to see where would be flying. The guards let him through without question. As he walked around the large open area, he studied everything carefully. Where would someone hide if they wanted to cause trouble? What equipment could be tampered with? What would be the best way to disrupt a dragon's flight? He noticed the vendor stalls being set up around the perimeter. He noticed the lighting equipment and sound systems. He noticed the emergency safety systems that were supposed to catch any young dragon who failed their first flight. And he noticed that some of those systems were positioned strangely, as if someone had moved them. That night made his own preparations. He went to the palace storage facilities, using his old janitor skills to move through them without attracting attention. He requisitioned some equipment, signing forms with codes that had helped him learn. Nothing illegal, nothing forbidden, just some simple tools that a maintenance worker might need. Found him working late that night, positioning foam canisters around the festival grounds. The guard raised an eyebrow. What are you doing? Asked. Just making sure the safety systems work properly, said. You know how it is, old habits. Studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Do you need help? I need you to trust me, said, and maybe position some guards in specific places tomorrow, just in case. Looked at the careful way had positioned everything, at the serious expression on his face. Then he smiled slightly. You see something the rest of us missed, don't you? Said. I hope I'm wrong, replied, but if I'm right, we need to be ready. The night before the festival, found on her favorite balcony. She looked nervous, her scales flickering with anxious colors. Are you scared about tomorrow? Asked, sitting beside her. Yes, admitted. What if I fail? What if I fall? You won't fail, said. You're strong and brave, but even if you did fall, it would be okay. Failing doesn't make you weak. It just makes you someone who tried. Were you scared? Asked. The night you found me. Thought back to that night in the loading bay, when he had made the choice to give away his only food. Yes, he said honestly, I was scared. I didn't know if what I was doing would work. I didn't know if you would live, but I did it anyway. Why? Asked. Because it was the right thing to do, said. That's not courage, that's just being human. Leaned against him, and they sat together watching the crystal forest shimmer in the moonlight. Tomorrow would bring danger new. But tonight, sitting with his friend, he felt ready for whatever came. The festival of ascending flames filled the sky with color and light. Thousands had gathered to watch the young dragons perform their first ceremonial flights. The air shimmered with heat as the hatchlings prepared themselves, their nervous energy making the temperature rise. Stood near the edge of the festival grounds, watching carefully. To anyone observing, he looked calm and relaxed, but his eyes were constantly moving, scanning the crowd, watching the vendor stalls, nodding where people stood and how they moved. And his guards were positioned exactly where had requested, though they probably didn't know why. Was in the crowd, also watching. She caught eye and gave a small nod. Stood with the other young dragons, her scales shimmering with nervous energy. She looked over at, and he gave her an encouraging smile and a thumbs up. She chirped happily and turned back to face the flight path. Sovereign stood on the royal platform, magnificent in his ceremonial armor. Lord stood near him, along with other high nobles. His expression was carefully neutral, but noticed how his eyes kept flicking to certain spots in the crowd. The ceremony began with traditional songs and speeches. Then, one by one, the young dragons took flight. Some flew gracefully, others wobbled a bit, but all of them made it successfully. The crowd cheered for each one. Finally, it was turn. She stepped forward, spreading her wings. Even in her young form, she was beautiful. The crowd fell silent, watching the sovereign's daughter prepare for her first flight. Launched herself into the air, her wings beating strongly. She rose higher and higher, following the traditional flight pattern. Held his breath, watching her soar. She was doing perfectly. Then he saw them. 3 figures dressed as festival vendors, moving in unison. They pulled out small devices from under their stalls. Sonic disruptors, realized. Designed to interfere with a dragon's inner ear to destroy their balance mid-flight. The devices activated with a high-pitched whine, jerked in midair, her wings faltering. She began to fall, tumbling from the sky. The crowd screamed. Sovereign roared in fury, but was already moving. He hit the triggers he had hidden among the vendor stalls, the ones connected to the modified foam dispensers he had positioned the night before. Thick, cushioning foam erupted from a dozen locations at once, creating a soft barrier directly in his fall path. At the same time, and his guards rushed the 3 attackers, exactly as had positioned them to do. The sonic disruptors were destroyed, their awful sound cutting off. Hit the foam barrier with a soft thump. The foam absorbed her fall completely, keeping her safe. She tumbled out of it a moment later, dazed but unhurt. Ran to her, checking her for injuries. "Are you okay?" he asked urgently. Made a confused chirping sound, then nodded. "What happened?" "Someone tried to hurt you," said, "but you're safe now." Guards surrounded the 3 attackers, forcing them to their knees. Sovereign descended from the platform, his fury making the air around him crackle with heat. The crowd parted before him like water. The attackers were questioned right there in front of everyone. Under the threat of the sovereign's wrath, they confessed quickly. They were mercenaries, hired to disrupt flight, and they named who had hired them, Lord. Was seized by guards before he could flee. They dragged him before the sovereign, forcing him to kneel, looked at him with eyes that promised death. "You dared to harm my daughter," said, his voice low and dangerous. "You hired criminals to attack her during a sacred ceremony. Give me one reason why I should not end your life right now." Said nothing, his head bowed. "Wait," said, stepping forward. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. "Can I speak to him, alone?" Frowned. "Why would you want that?" "Please," said, "just for a moment." After a long pause, nodded. The guards pulled to a private area nearby. Followed, and the guards stepped back to give them space, though they remained close enough to intervene if needed. Glared at with hatred. "Come to gloat, human, to enjoy your victory." "No," said quietly. "I came to talk. Why did you do this? Why did you try to hurt?" "Because you don't belong here," snarled. "Your kind is weak, inferior. You have no right to stand among us, to influence our princess to live in our palace. You are destroying our traditions." "I understand," said, and blinked in surprise. "You what?" "I understand being afraid," said. "Afraid that your world is changing. Afraid that the things you value are being lost. Afraid that you're powerless to stop it. I get it." Stared at him. "You understand nothing." I understand that you made a terrible choice because you were scared, said. Not because you're evil, because you're afraid. But here's the thing about traditions. They're supposed to protect what's valuable, not prevent all change. Your people have survived for thousands of years because you adapted when you needed to. And what would you know about what we need? Asked bitterly. Nothing, admitted. I'm just a janitor. I clean floors. But I know that kindness doesn't make anyone weaker. I know that being different doesn't make someone worthless. And I know that everyone deserves a second chance. Why are you saying this? Asked. I tried to kill the princess. You should want me dead. I should, agreed. And if you had succeeded, maybe I would, but you failed, is safe. So now I have a choice. I can demand revenge or I can ask for something better. Sovereign had been listening from a distance. Now he approached, his expression thoughtful. What are you asking for? Asked. Don't kill him, said. Take away his rank, yes. Punish him, yes. But give him a chance to do better. Let him help me build a cultural exchange program between humans and let him learn that we're not so different. The crowd, which had been listening through broadcast screens, erupted in shocked whispers. Looked at like he had grown a second head. You would spare me? Asked. After what I did. Everyone makes mistakes, said. What matters is what you do after. Sovereign considered this for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. Lord, you are stripped of your title and lands, but you will work with on this cultural program. If you succeed in this, you may earn back some of what you lost. If you fail, or if you ever threaten my daughter again, there will be no mercy. Bowed his head. I understand. The festival ended with successfully completing her flight on the second attempt. This time, she soared beautifully, her scales catching the light like jewels. The crowd cheered louder than ever. 6 months passed. The cultural exchange program grew beyond anyone's expectations. Humans came to study and teach, visited Earth, learning about human culture and history. To everyone's surprise, became one of the program's strongest supporters. Working with humans had shown him that strength came in many forms. And Wu arrived and settled into their new home. Wu's treatment was successful, and he was healthy for the first time in years. He and became inseparable friends, despite the difference in their species. One evening, stood on his balcony with Sovereign, watching the sun set over the crystal forests. The Sovereign had taken to visiting him sometimes, just to talk. I never properly thanked you, said. Not just for saving life, but for showing us a different way. I just shared my lunch, said with a small smile. You gave everything you had to someone who could offer you nothing, corrected. That is not just anything. That is extraordinary. Your species is small and short-lived. You are fragile compared to us, but you contain something we had forgotten, the ability to show kindness without expecting reward. The galaxy is better for having humans in it. Flew up to the balcony, Wu riding on her back and laughing with delight. She landed gracefully and the boy slid off, still giggling. Said excitedly, tell us a story, tell us one from Earth. Smiled and sat down, and Wu settled beside him and even sat to listen. Okay, said. Once, on a planet called Earth, there was a little girl who was very hungry. As he told his story, the stars began to appear above them. News of what had happened here was spreading across the galaxy. Other species were starting to look at humans differently, seeing them not as weak, but as possessing a different kind of strength. And somewhere in the palace, former Lord was writing a report about the cultural exchange program, including a section about how much he had learned from working alongside humans. The universe was vast and full of powerful species, but humanity had found its place among them, not through weapons or technology, but through something simpler and more profound. The choice to care for others, even when it cost everything and promised nothing in return. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget.